So in this video, we're going to be doing a quick demo of SAT scores and doing some analysis, and we're going to use pivot tables throughout this document. This is very similar to the questions you'll be presented when you work with local businesses in the spring, where we have them, they will bring data to us. They'll usually have questions about the data that they haven't researched or don't know the answers to. And it's similar to what we're going to be doing today. So we're going to go through this list. And this is the data from the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction, where they've got SAT data years for a number of years. These are the questions we're going to look for. And I'm going to pull up this document. This is the same exact questions. So these are the things we're going to be looking for. Across the state, which campus had the greatest increase in people taking the SAT? Increase in count, test takers, and increase in percentage, campus percentage. Greatest decrease, test takers, campus percentage. Which campus had the highest percentage of people who took the test? And then also, which district had the highest? And then we're going to have a number of questions that are all related to the data for 2021. And in this column, we have a value that's calculated, and you can see this real quick. So it says if E4 is a campus, E4 is whether it's a campus or a district, right? So is it a campus or a district? If it's a campus, what you're going to see is the district code, if it has a district code, and then the campus number. And so every campus, or every district rather, has a number. And DPI, Department of Public Instruction, refers to this as a local education agency, LEA. So Chapel Hill Carver City Schools is 681. That's our local, 681 is our LEA. And so for each of these schools, in this case, high schools are the ones that are taking the SAT, they have a code that pertains to them. And so what I've done is created this unique code that is district.campus. And that's how we're going to be able to do some research to find what campus has something, and then also what actual, where the districts have specific things. So our first question is, which state had the greatest increase? So for us, we're going to look at this campuses tab, and I want to look at adding some new columns. I'm just going to get rid of these for now. So the values I want to add are, how many people did they have taking the tests in 2021? How many people, test takers, did they have in 2020? And what was the percent of people on their campus that took the test in 2021, and the percent in 2020? There we go. And in doing this, again, we've got a count before and a count after, so we can do a subtraction to find the difference. And then we also have a percent of the campuses that do that. So to do that, we're going to use a VLOOKUP. VLOOKUP. What is going to be my key? So again, if you look at VLOOKUP, it starts with a key, in what range, and then what column over am I looking for? So using the unique ID as a key, in what range, 2021 rather, and then I want to find the number of people who tested. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 columns over, comma, 6, and I'll just say false. It might be sorted. We're just going to pretend like it's not. All right, so that is what I'm going to be using throughout. And one thing I'm going to change on the next column over, I'm going to change the year. And then in the following column, E, I'm going to keep the year, change the the column over, so that I'm looking instead at this G column, 7. And I'm going to do that through. So that looks good. Paste the same, change my year, 2020. Paste the same, change the value to 7. And it's interesting is NC School of Science and Math, they don't list, or I don't know what is required to provide into DPI, Department of Public Instruction, but they just tell you how many people are taking the test, not the percentage of their campus that are taking the test. And I can double click, or I can drag this through all my campuses, or we learned today, I can grab the column, grab that chunk of row, on a Mac, Command Shift down, or a Control Shift down on a PC, and then paste that all in. I get NAs where I can't do where my VLOOKUP didn't exist. So that's all that's saying. Great. So I've got my data for what I'm going to need to do for the first chunk. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab our data and make a new pivot table. Insert pivot table. What I want to do is I want to have rows, all the different schools as my rows. And then for the value, I'm going to have the years, just so that we can do the math on this. And then I'm going to use a calculated field that will do something that calculates, obviously, this year minus last year. And because there's a space, I need to put them in quotes. So TT 2021 minus TT 2020. And I see that calculated. If you had done, again, my values, whatever column I'm referencing, has to match with what's here. If I do, the year TT, I saw people that did uppercase and lowercase. If I don't have it exactly as it is, I'll add an extra space, I'm going to get errors all the way down. And that's why when you are seeing this error all the way down, it means that there's something in this calculation that I can't figure out what to do. And that usually is a text issue. Okay, so I've got which ones are I've got the number, I can kind of do the math, that looks like that's working. And now what I want to do is I want to sort it by that calculated field. So Porter Ridge had the most decline, negative 325. So in my findings, which campus had the greatest decrease? Porter Ridge, negative 325. So I don't know, as I said in other classes, I don't know what that means. We would have to look into that. Did they just not require it? Did that school, is under construction and they've had to move students? I don't really know, but that's the number. And then NC School of Science and Math, they had an additional 37 students. So positive 37. Then the next question is, what about percentages? Right, so in my pivot table, I've already got my data for the percentages. I can just drag that in here, year over year, 2020, and really you don't even need, and these are counts, so let's keep that as a sum. You don't really even need your values in here. You really only need the calculated field because it's going to do the math for you. So 21% and make sure that lines up. Again, if it doesn't line up and I'm not seeing numbers, that tells me something is off. So it looks like Onslow Early College had a positive 57.7. I don't know what, the NA means that it wasn't in our data set for 2020. I don't really know what that was. So given that, you can just leave it as it is. So I'm going to say Onslow had the greatest percent change, 57.7. Plus 57.7%. And then let's do the opposite of our calculated field, ascending, and we see that Hawthorne Academy went from everyone, all 100% of their students took it, to 0%. And I don't know if that means, I don't know anything about the school, so I don't know what backstory there. Again, that's kind of the challenge that data presents, is that you have to kind of do some research to what your data might mean. All the questions we're going to start with are the ones that relate to campus. So I'm going to do a conditional format. Text contains campus. You don't need to do this if you're following along. But that's so we know the order we're going to address it in. So then what campus has the highest percentage taking the test? So I'm going to go back to my table here. I know that the value of my sum, that tells me something, right? So I can say, sort it by this, descending, and I see that Early College had in 2021 93.8% of their campus taking the SAT. So which campuses? And we'd say 93.8%. Great. Now I have a bunch of questions that are all about 2021. So in 2021, here's that table. Okay, so I see all the schools. I'm going to click up in this section over here to grab my data, make another pivot table. Okay. The first question is, which campus, so campus is my rows, had the highest average total, so it's values for total, with 100 plus So now I've got some sort of filter. So rows is my campus. That looks good. Total is my values. Average and sum are gonna give you the same result. Since there's only gonna be that, you might get an error where they don't have anything in that space. In this case, it doesn't really matter. Number tested. Now I'm gonna create a conditional format that is greater than 100. Sort by that total, descending, and I see that NC School of Science and Math had a average total 1470. Which campus, NC School of Science and Math, had the highest average total in 2021? Now I'm going to make some adjustments. I'm changing that filter, and I'm looking at English reading and writing. So let's start with the filter. 250. And instead of looking at total, I'm going to look at English reading and writing. Do my sort by English reading and writing. NC School of Science and Math, 695. Next question. Where does Chapel Hill rank in math scores with no filter, right? We don't have any clarifications or conditions that we're looking at. So get rid of this. And we're looking at math and sort by math. I can see by looking at this that Chapel Hill High is here at 5th with a 668. 5th. And then where do we rank in total compared to schools within a plus or minus of where we were? So I can look at my pivot table. Obviously, I'm going to change my math to total. I have a filter. I want to filter. And now instead of a greater than, I want to do an is between. Is it between the numbers that were provided, 112 and 162? So that's plus 25 minus 25 from where we were. Sort by the total. For schools that are within this range, Chapel Hill High had the highest average total for that. So those are the questions we started with today. And again, I wrote these notes on the board so you can kind of go through them. What did we do? We started with making some columns, which had our campus, had our years of the total test takers. We also had our 2 years of our percent of campus that tested. Then we made a pivot table, took that into a pivot table. In our pivot table, we had rows were campus, values were initially were our 2 years, whether that's your test takers or your percent, same idea. Then we took that, we also had a calculated field, which was to this year, 2021 minus 2020. Okay, and then we sorted by ascending or descending. Same idea. Do that on the other one too, but maybe we changed our percent to be test takers. Again, this one's changing the ascending when you're looking for the greater, right? This is the greatest decrease. I needed to change it whether it was ascending or descending. Then the next one, we could use the same exact data. We had our pivot table. I'm just going to copy this as our pivot table. And then in this one, I just wanted to look at what was in our pivot table, keeping the rows as columns, as campuses, and then a value was the 2021%. And then I didn't need to worry about my calculated, and then looking at the ascending or descending told me what campus had the highest number. Then we get into the 2021. So 2021, I went and grabbed all the data, made a pivot table, and then my campuses were rows. And then for this value, it said I wanted to know what was the highest total. Values was total, and I needed to have a filter of if greater than 100. Same exact thing for the next one, except instead of 100, I went to 250. Instead of total, I was looking at my English reading writing. Come down to the next one, used the exact same pivot table, changed from from total to math. There was no condition. Again, sorting it ascending or descending is really what you're looking at and making sure that you understand what those numbers look like. Obviously, there is a whole column of data there that told us what to work with. Then we have a totals. Total, and then this condition was, is our value less than 162 and greater than, so is our total test taker count greater than 112? Again, that's plus or minus the number that students had, Chapel Hill had by 25. So comparable populations, or at least comparable testing numbers. So that was the questions that all related to our campuses. So let's take a moment there. That's where we ended for day one. All right, so now we're going to look at the values that relate to something related to districts. So I can say that this is going to look at a district, this one's going to look at a district, this is going to look at a district, this is going to look at a district, and then we're eventually going to do something related just Chapel Hill High and Chapel Hill Carrboro City Schools. There's going to be a little dashboard. So the question is, which district had the highest average test takers? So what I would do, similar to what we did in our other one, I'm going to look at my value for my change of test takers. That's what it said in, right? So that's all the question was related to which district had the highest average test takers. Say which had the highest count of test takers. Yeah. So I'll just do 2020. I think I actually don't even need to do a pivot table for this, or rather don't need to do a VLOOKUP. I could easily do, let's do a VLOOKUP just for the heck of it. VLOOKUP with this value in 2021, where is that my UID? And then the question is, what was their test score? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Column 8, and is sorted false. Great. I can double click that through. I have a bunch of data that obviously is not that useful. And then what I want to do is I want to create a sort this data by my column 3. You could do this with a pivot table. It is ascending false. It tells me that as ascending is actually, let's say, true. No, sorry. In this case, we have a bunch of asterisks, so I probably need to do a filter out asterisks. And so to do that, I'm going to come in here, filter my columns A through C, where in column C is greater than 0. Close my parenthesis, and is greater than is not the asterisks. There we go. And I've got my district and the year, and I see that Chapel Hill Carrboro City Schools had the highest average for the year as a district. So which district had the highest average test takers? Districts, Chapel Hill Carrboro Schools with a 1380. All right, so now we've got our pivot table back for the 2020. I'm going to go back over to this pivot table we used yesterday. And instead of it being campuses, which was D, I want to use school districts. And so this is going to be B as in boy. No. Column. Yeah. Take out this filter. I see a bunch of numbers. That's okay. And then I see a bunch of school districts that are actual districts. We're used to seeing like that. And then we see the sums for a bunch of those. The question was, which school district with over 500 test takers had the highest total? So in my pivot table, total, number tested greater than 500. Let's see what that does. And so I see the schools, and I want to sort that by the descending. So Wake, again, the blank values you could easily get rid of using just a, UID is not blank. Gets rid of that. So if you were avoiding those blanks for a long time, you could just ignore the blanks. So Wake County Schools had the highest average of districts with 500 more test takers. Then it says, where does Chapel Hill rank in ERW compared to other North Carolina schools? So let's look at a couple things. Don't have any filters. I want to look at ERW. I want to sort by ERW. And let's do something here to fix this. We want it to only show campuses. So let's say school or district is equal to, filter, school or district is only equal to districts. Great. And we have it sorting like that. So Chapel Hill Carver City Schools is at the highest with an average 656 for English reading and writing. Okay, so I've got a pivot. So let's look back at how do we do that? Again, on the explanation for our districts, I had to create, I actually did a sort, and I did a filtered data where my data, I'll just put that as a data range, is, comma, that column, I think it was C, is not equal to a asterisk. So it was actually giving me a real value. And then I sorted by that column, and then it was sorted ascending or descending. I think it was true. Great. Then our next one, we did a pivot table. We had a pivot table for our, and then we picked districts. We did have a filter where campus or district is equal to district. And then we had values that were for total. This was the highest total. Values equals total. And we also had a filter that was greater than 500 totals test takers. Then we had, the next question was related to English reading and writing. We just did that one. So instead of totals, I looked at English reading, writing. Instead of filter, there was no filter. Okay. Chapel Hill was first in that order. Which district had the highest average total per student? Really what I guess this question is, this is a weird question, which was like, which campuses had few students and high totals? It gets a little bit blurry, but that's kind of what's being asked. So in this question, I created a, let's do a conditional field. I want to do totals. And let's say I also look at my number of students tested. And I wanted to create now a conditional field that is equal to total over number tested. Again, this doesn't tell us much. In fact, I don't know what it tells us at all. And again, this is, I guess, you would have to do a multiply times or something to get an average. This is just saying like these schools had few students and they did pretty well. I think you probably need to get some clarification on that. Let's take, is it which district or which district had the highest totals per? Not just, I guess, small districts that still did well. That's what this is showing, right? So schools that there's a lot of people who didn't have any values. Pimlico had only 10 students that tested. Those students had a 1220 average. What does that mean? Again, like I said, it doesn't really mean much, but as we're trying to just do some evaluation, that tells us something. What you have here is up to you. But that's how to do this assignment. Let's take a second and then let's come back and do the dashboard.